Hey guys, how's it going? Today I am with two special guests. I am with Katrina and a special guest of Avan Alpaca. You might know him from his Alpaca resource website, and he is on the video today. How are we doing, guys?
I'm good.
Doing good.
Really good, really good. So today we're going to be tackling a few questions of the curriculum in general, such as a few study tips, a few challenge questions, as well as some overall debate and writing strategies. So the first question I want to ask you guys today is, do you guys have any study tips to knowing the majority of the curriculum or just studying in general for the curriculum?
So, scholars, hello. Basically, as you probably already know, a general tip to study the curriculum is to take notes about it. Whether those notes are online or in a notebook somewhere, that doesn't really matter. Whatever works best for you, it will work. Now, as you may already know, there are 6 different subject areas: science, special area, history, literature, arts and music, and I've forgotten one. Is it special area already? Oh well. Anyway, basically, it doesn't really matter how you go about doing these subjects. You can choose whichever ones you're the most comfortable with, but don't study only one or only 2. Try to spread yourself out evenly between all of them, ideally, if you've got the time.
Yeah,
Yes.
I totally agree. Because you need yourself to be more well-rounded rather than just putting pressure on you and your other teammate to know one subject by heart or 2 subjects by heart. So just, I don't know, spread yourself out a little, become more well-rounded, and it actually really helps in all rounds.
Yeah, and do you guys make a schedule leading up to the competition, a study schedule, or do you just kind of cram in for the last 3 days, or what's your strategy around that?
You should never cram. That's a horrible move, and one that is not going to get you any good positions. But I mean, you can always tell me that you got amazing medals with only 3 days to spare. But honestly, if you're going to a global round, and especially for Tournament of Champions, which is coming up in a couple of months' time, you should not be cramming. That is not what you should be doing. In terms of a study schedule, okay, because I run a website and a YouTube channel, I have a study schedule. Every day I spend at least 1 to 2 hours on my quizzes, Kahoots, and whatnot. You shouldn't be spending nearly as much time as that. Okay, I don't have a social life because of World Scholars Club, so don't spend as much time on that. Okay, ideally 3 hours in total every week is completely fine, and you'll still be really good with that. Then that's completely fine.
Studying just in general and just start a bit earlier before the competition starts. And usually, I mean, not gonna lie, regionals and globals and TOC, they're all 3 different levels of difficulty. And usually when you get to regionals, you sort of get a sense of the questions that they're gonna ask. And then when you get to globals, you realize that, wow, this shit is serious. And they're gonna actually go in depth in specifics, and they're gonna ask you questions that you never thought they were gonna ask. So when it gets to TOC, you gotta be ready.
And our next question is, what have you guys done to prepare for the competition that has worked very well for you guys as a whole, like the overall competition? What is your strategy around there?
Okay, so something my school does is basically every Thursday we have a World Scholars Club session. It's very popular in many other schools around the world. I'm sure that some scholars, maybe you as a scholar, probably have a club like that. And every time we meet up, we either have a practice debate, we either have a practice writing, or we go over the resources. And it's this social element of studying that really helps, because when you're studying with other people, you not only get to hear their notes and their perspectives, but you also get to reinforce your own knowledge by benefiting from the work of others. Now, obviously, that should work in general. So really study together with your teammates, study together with your school. Don't study by yourself. The only thing you can really study by yourself and get away with is the challenge, because different people prepare in different ways for the challenge. But always remember that the World Scholars Cup is a social studying activity.
Yeah, I feel like people should learn how to do that rather than just studying on their own and taking their own time to do stuff. But actually, touching on what Avan said about the challenge, you really need to find your way of studying. You have to find out whether or not you're an auditory learner, or you learn better when you're writing, you memorize faster if you're just reading through things, or you're talking to people. Because I'm an auditory learner, so I learn better when I talk to people. actually really helps when you socialize with people about the topic, so you can like debate with them, discuss questions. Really, it's a really great way to learn if you find out how to learn.
So for those people who are cramming on the last 3 days, what strategies do you have for them to learn as much as they possibly can? Not that anyone should cram, but if they were to cram for whatever chance, what would you suggest that they do to maximize their success?
To the work of other people, such as OnePoa, or even this YouTube channel, or my own website. I'm going to put a shameless plug here. But in that, those websites are great, and they have activities as well for you to do. And these activities like practice quiz words or Kahoots and whatnot, and practice challenges are really good to sort of get you familiar with not only the resources, but also with how you're going to have to think in the actual event. In terms of how you prepare the other events with bowl and writing and debate, ideally you should not be cramming for any of those events, because if you do, there's no really good way to prepare for them. Debating and writing take a lot of time to master. Katrina and I have been in the World House Cup for 4 years, I think. I'm still getting the hang of debating, and I'm nowhere near mastering writing. It's a long process. You shouldn't be spending 3 days on this. So yeah.
Well, okay, back to what Joaquin was saying. If you were actually going to cram, I do suggest that you focus maybe not on all the subjects, because either you have two tactics. Either you spread yourself out on all the subjects and try to get like a well-rounded idea based on everything, or you focus on 2 or 3 subjects and try to get the maximum out of it and do your best in just 2 or 3 subjects. I mean, I don't recommend it, but that's your tactic.
And yeah, building onto that, if you do study heavily for 2 or 3 subjects, you should also have a change of mindset, okay? Because you're cramming for 3 days and you've only been able to study those 2 or 3 subjects, you should not be expecting any more medals than whatever subjects you studied for. Yes, it can happen that you will get a medal for whatever subject you didn't study. It has happened. It's a lucky fluke or something like that. But you should not be expecting so much of yourself if you've done very little preparation work for the subjects.
And on to our next question is there a specific way or strategy you use to tackle and study the curriculum?
So, as I mentioned before, I just use my own notes, and I keep on making stuff for myself to practice my notes on. And whenever there's a round coming up, be it a regional or global or even TSC, my team will schedule at least 1 or 2 study sessions together where we all get together physically and then we compare our notes, because sometimes my teammates specialize in other areas than what I do, and it's nice to get their notes off. And that really works for me. I'm not sure how it is for other scholars, obviously, but that's what I do at least.
I usually like doing group discussions. Those are easier for me because my teammates are really into the whole teaching thing. So they told me like they study better when they teach people. And I'm a very I think I'm a slow learner. So they have to explain things like twice for me. So then it's easier for them to memorize everything. And then I eventually get it. And that's just better because I don't want to read it. So yeah, that works. What else? I also like to make tons of notes on those specific case studies you learn based on every subject. There's like a person you have to know, experiment, some time, dates, and all the background information that you need to know about these people. I just sort of make notes and then I go through them whenever I have time and just keep up a schedule. If you're following a schedule, don't derail yourself from that schedule and just stick to it and you get better.
Great. And our next question is, what strategies do you have for preparing for debate and writing? We've been talking a lot about the curriculum, but for those interested in debate and writing, how will you prepare for that to maximize your score?
Okay, so prior to the actual, to really the round, practice debates are always handy to have, be it either online or in a physical realm. You can always rely on practice debates to get at least some practice out of your speaking skills or your points and your use of evidence. Really, practice makes progress here. But in terms of during the debate itself, you're graded on teamwork, and you have 15 minutes to prepare at the beginning, plus 1 minute in between every speaker. So during that minute, those 15 minutes, you should be communicating with your team. You should be sharing notes. You should be bouncing points off one another, and you should be pointing out flaws in one another's work, right? Yes, you may have an amazing point, but if your point is flawed and your teammate points it out, then you can save yourself the embarrassment of giving the opposition an easy chance to wreck your team. You should also be writing down everything that you have in your mind at this time, points, evidence, whatever, rebuttals even, on a note card, ideally not on a laptop or phone. Scholars who have seen me debate before do not take the challenge of debating without notes. That is not a good idea. That is a suicidal move. Katrina is an excellent debater. She's one of the best I've ever seen, and she uses notes, and honestly, she's amazing with those.
I feel like I completely agree with Avan, because debating really takes time and practice. So either you're a great speaker, you speak in front of tons of people, you do public speaking, you do debate forums and stuff like that, then you'll be fine. You'll get there eventually if you keep practicing. For writing, I feel like if you are someone who you're really interested in writing essays or creative stories, you would probably read a lot of books and like collect a lot of vocabulary, because usually that's really impressive if you can, express yourself in ways that people don't usually express themselves in. Maybe you can express yourself with words that are very, unique. You can come across really eye-catching, and usually that's how you get good scores, because it's a very subjective challenge.
Okay, now on to the nitty-gritty of the challenge and bowl. One of your specialties, Avan. So what exactly is your attack strategy for the challenge? So when you see the challenge, what is the first thing that you do?
Let's continue with that analogy of the challenge being a monster, shall we? So when you attack the challenge in this way, consider the challenge is some sort of opponent you have to defeat. Where do you go first? The weak spot. And that weak spot is basically what you've studied the most, right? Once the challenge lands in front of you and you're given the 60 or however many minutes you get to answer the challenge, do not start at question number 1. Never start at question number 1. Start at whatever question number you specialize in first. So if you specialized in history, find the history section first and do that first. Because what happens is that people tend to think they have to do it in order, and they don't have to. But when they do it in order, they realize that they only have 5 minutes at the end of the time to do 20 more questions, and those 20 questions were the questions that they studied the most. So you wasted hours worth of studying because you couldn't manage your time in the challenge. Also, this is like really nitty-gritty. In a challenge, you get 5 bubbles, and you can fill in as many bubbles as you want, and you'll still get points if you get it right. My personal tip is that you should never fill in more than 3 bubbles, and even then that's stretching it. You should ideally only fill in 1 or 2 bubbles at the most. But yeah, that's my tips.
And when it comes to time management, how do you manage your time so you don't end up having like 30 questions at the end that you haven't answered? Is there any strategies to make sure we don't get to that state of utter panic at the end of the challenge?
Personally, time has never been a concern for me, but generally speaking, the World Scholars Cup do a good job of reminding you how much time you have left. They'll go like 30 minutes remaining, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Generally speaking, use those time. You take those for granted, honestly. If you have 30 minutes remaining, you should be at least halfway through the challenge, mathematically speaking. If you have 15 minutes remaining, you should have 2 or maybe even 1.5 sections left. And if you have 5 minutes remaining, you should either be done and looking over your answers, or you should only have 5 questions left at the most. Do not spend more than 2 minutes or even 1 minute, 30 seconds on each question. Because if you do that, you're going to get bogged down, and you're going to find, as Joaquin mentioned, you're going to just color in everything at the end. That's not going to be good for you.
But really, you yourself should be aware of the time yourself. You really shouldn't depend on the people in front of the stage with the microphones telling you the time. You really, maybe, look around, see where people are. If you're really behind, you got to get a move on. That's just it.
Yeah. And do you have any strategies maybe for answering questions in less than a minute and a half? I mean, how do you do it, Avan?
Okay, so, good God, there are people much more qualified than me to say this, but basically what I do is that I look at the question, I look at the answers, and then it's basically a process of elimination. Find which answers are the most illogical based on your studying, eliminate those, and then you're going to get down to a group of maybe 2 or maximum 3 possible answers, and then from there use logic and reasoning to figure out which of them is the most plausible one, and then fill in the ones that happen there. There are going to be questions where you have no idea what the question is or what even the answers are, and in that case you sort of have to apply this unique World Scholars Cup logic of thinking that doesn't quite sound like the answer, or based on what I know from other curriculums, because they do link very closely, that can't be the answer. So it's a little bit of a tough task, but yeah.
Question is, what are your teamwork strategies for the bowl?
Okay, so for the ball, I often say this a lot, but it is true. The ball is the most divisive event in the World Scholars Cup. It has made and broken teams up. I've seen so many teams get so mad at each other that they literally refuse to function as a unit after the ball. That should not be happening, okay? The ball is not the end of the world for your team. You can still have a great time even if you mess up in the ball. So what my team does is that we get the person who studied not so much the least, but is a bit uncertain about all of the curriculum. We get that person to be what we call the buzzer person. Clicker person. We give them the clicker and they sit in between the rest of the team. And then every time the answers come up, the team converses as to which answer is the most plausible. Now, obviously, the ball questions have their specific topic and their specific subject area. And based on whoever studied that subject area the most, the person with the clicker trusts the answer of that person. And that's basically the strategy that we use there.
I would say the person in the middle is usually the one least likely to debate with everyone, because just based on my own experience, my team, I have 2 teammates, and they're both very stubborn and they're both very opinionated. So when it comes to a decision, I'm usually the one that has to pick between them, or they provide a more convincing argument. I'm like, okay, maybe she's correct, and then I just click her answer. I also feel like when a question comes up, shouldn't put that much pressure on that one person who studied that subject, because really everyone should have studied all the subjects all around, and it really should come down to a team discussion and teamwork rather than just saying, oh, you studied that, it's your answer, you know?
Asking specifically you, Avan, since you're very experienced in the field, what are the main differences between the bowl and the challenge, logic and content wise? Well, what should people look for when they kind of compare the 2 types of questions they could be asked?
Katrina is also very experienced, but thank you for the honor. So basically, during the challenge, you're not going to get the media that you get in the bowl. You might have a picture or 2. I've seen pictures on the challenge, but you're going to basically get text written answers. These questions are very they're very content and thought heavy. So maybe the first 10 questions are going to be about the specific content, like which of these was the last one, which of these sites was the last to be constructed, or which of these historical figures is most likely to blah, blah, blah. Basically, but then after that, you're going to get to the much harder questions. And these are the questions that decide who gets gold, who gets silver, who gets a trophy. These are the questions that ask you to not only link the subject area to another subject area, but also to think about how that subject area is linked to sort of the theme, the overarching theme of the World Scholars Cup, or even how things in that subject area are linked to maybe the case studies of other subject areas. So that's the harder part of the challenge. Now, obviously in the bowl, you're going to get media with your questions. Many questions have either videos or photos or even a photo gallery. And during those times, what you should be looking for is the similarity between before the media even starts playing, before the questions even being asked, you should ask yourself, what is the most likely thing they're going to ask, right? So if they're playing a clip from a movie and you know what the movie is about, you can think about how does it link to the question and the subject area that it's based to. That's sort of thought process that you have to do for the bowl.
I would say the challenge is actually more specific. They actually focus a lot on like authors' feelings and the influences that they had during the time that they made a piece of art or something. And the challenge actually focuses more on how their relationship with some theme affects the way that their art is created. Challenge also focuses more on specific titles and specific authors and pieces that connect together. And I realized in the bowl, they don't really do that because they already asked those questions in the challenge. In the bowl, they actually ask you to find, well, like Avan said, the similarity between things, but they're more vague. They're in a sense more like an embodiment of something else rather than just saying this is that. They actually ask you questions where like you would try and find, okay, this could represent that could symbolize that, instead of being the actual representation.
Okay, and our final question here is, do you guys study differently for the bowl compared to the challenge, or that basically that night before the bowl, what type of study do you do specifically for the bowl that you wouldn't necessarily do for the challenge?
Personally, I don't do anything different. I just reread my notes for both the bowl and the challenge. But at least for the bowl, I look more specifically at the theoretical stuff, like Katrina said. What could this link to in terms of representation, or how does it link to the other subject areas? Whereas during the challenge, I'm more concerned with what are the actual facts, details, and context of this piece or this topic, because that's more likely to pop up. Before the ball, at least the night before the ball, I highly recommend, but I don't do this myself but I highly recommend, especially if you're in a global or in TOC, you should get together with your team and set out your sort of strategy for the ball, right? Sort of dictate who gets the sort of expertise or sort of the upper hand when it comes to what subject. So for example, if literature comes out, I can agree with my teammates that will allow one of my teammates who studied literature, to get more say that in the answer than myself, because I didn't study it as much as she did. That's something that you can do if you have the time to, but if not, I still recommend just reading your notes over and over again before the bowl and the challenge.
Yeah. Also, before the bowl, you've probably already had your challenge. So then you already know what subjects you're missing. You already know the questions that they asked and the stuff lacking in your expertise. So when you come home that day from the hardest day of the whole competition, you should know what you need to focus on. And you go back and you go through all the notes that you missed and you forgot about, and really try and strengthen that expertise in your brain, because tomorrow you really need to, like the next day, you really need to focus on all the stuff that you missed out, and then also at the same time maintain the knowledge you had the day before for the challenge. I also suggest, most people don't do this, but I felt like it helped me and my team. We actually went through the discussion questions, and we had a whole debate session where we would just discuss everything, and we got more comfortable with talking to each other and like expressing our points of views. Because I don't know, maybe you have a teammate you don't know too well. I feel like this is a good team bonding moment, because the bowl really is about your teamwork. Just saying, yeah.
So again, this has been a few good friends of mine that I met at the Beijing Glow Round, Avan and Katrina. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. Hope you guys subscribe. You can check out their Instagram and YouTube channel, as well as Avan's blog in the description down below. And until next time, stay productive. I'll see you guys in the next video.